All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hold on. Let me move my microphone. Good afternoon, everyone, to Getting Shit Done with Tanwa, part two. Today is day 7. So today is a slightly special topic, I guess. It's about how to negotiate with your advisor. Um, I'm not sure if the word negotiate is a good word or not because that makes it sound like you're trying to get something out of your advisor, right? Which is like, uh, it's complicated. Let's put it this way. So for those of you who just tune in, Getting Shit Done with Tanwa is a series that happens every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Right? Friday, 1:30 p.m. Bangkok time. So the goal of this series is to get you to be the best graduate student slash researchers slash whatever the hell you want to be as far as being a learner goes. This is part 2 of the series, so we already had part 1 of the series in the first half of the year, right? So in part 1 we talk about how to get better at using and learning English. So in part 2 it's about trying to, I guess, graduate and doing research on time. So most of the stuff that I talk about in this series is usually from my own experience when I was a graduate student back in the United States. So this is just me sharing my experience, I guess, with you on how I survived my experience as a graduate student, right? As far as communicating with my advisor goes, or went, I guess, because that was like many years ago. As far as communicating with my advisor went, I wouldn't say it was easy for me, and I wouldn't say it was hard either. It was a mixture of both. Okay. So today I'm gonna walk you through what happened to me as I joined a graduate school, and the difference between the undergrad and the graduate level of study, and the interaction differences between the undergrad level of communications and the graduate level of communications, and what you could learn from that experience of mine, so that you have a better experience, I guess, the better and easier experience in communicating with your advisor, right? So let's do that. So the first thing that I want to point out is that, especially for Thai students in Thai education system, right, the gap between high school and your undergrad, so that's your bachelor's degree, is not that big. Okay, in high school, maybe you took classes, and then teacher tell you where to go, or your schedule tells you where to go. You're still living with your family and all that stuff, right? And then the difference between high school and the undergrad level is that you're no longer living with your family, right? Maybe you're living in a dormitory, you're living on your own in like another part of the town or another part of the country or another part of the world, right? But in general, at least for the first few years of your bachelor's degree, the total experience, educational experience, is not that different compared to your high school years, right? You go to classes, lecturers still tell you what to do, where to go, the homework that you have to do. And that's why adjusting yourself from your high school years to your undergrad level of study is not that difficult. I mean, it's difficult for some people, but for the most part, it's not that difficult. Right? So that's high school to undergrad. However, to go from undergrad to graduate level of study, whether it's master's degree or PhD, right, that's a huge, huge gap. Right? The first gap that you're gonna run into, right, the first huge wall that you're gonna run into when it comes to graduate study level is the language barrier, right? All of a sudden, when you were in undergrad, a lot of people was talking to you maybe in your local languages, in Thai or whatever, right? Chinese or whatever, where you come from. As soon as you get to graduate level of studies, you start hearing people communicate a lot more in English, right? And it's not even like mixed Thai and English. Sometimes they just have a full-blown conversation in English because people who teach at the graduate level of study are usually pretty fluent in English, right? Maybe they study abroad, maybe they have been in Thailand all their lives, but they are really good at English. That's why they got enough credentials to be lecturers at the graduate level of study, right? So all of a sudden you start hearing these people using English all the time, and then you get intimidated, right? So why do they use English all the time? So we talked about this before in part 1 of GSD, right? People use English because English is a universal language for communicating your research, right? Communicating your expertise, right? And using different languages for thinking and communicating is not that efficient, right? Because sometimes you want to think and speak in the same language that you use to think. So the first barrier that you got, the first huge wall that you're gonna run into when you get to the graduate level of study is this language barrier. All of a sudden, everything's in English, right? The text is in English, the research paper is in English, everything is in fucking English. And then you get intimidated. And then you don't want to talk to your advisor because every time you talk to your advisor, he or she answers in English. And you get intimidated because you don't think you're good at English, right? So then you stop talking to your advisor. And now you're screwed. I was about to say the F word, but I've been warned by some people to tone down my language, but fuck them. It's my show, yo. So yeah, so you get intimidated and then you stop talking to your advisor and you basically screwed. Because if a student does not talk to his or her advisor, it is really, really difficult to graduate, right? So that's the first huge wall that you're going to run into as you jump from undergrad to graduate level that will prevent you from communicating effectively with your advisor. So language. Right? The second barrier that you're going to run into is this thing called imposter syndrome, right? So an imposter syndrome is this. An imposter syndrome is this insecurity in yourself that you think you're not worth it, right? So imagine your advisor sent you to a conference, right? And you start listening to some research talks by other people. And in your mind, you don't understand at all, right? Like 90% of the time, you have no idea what the speaker is saying. But then you don't want to feel stupid. You don't want to, and most of all, you don't want to look stupid. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do is this. You're going to look at the speaker and the speaker is going to say something ridiculous to you like, oh, that machine is an incorporation of Meson graviton inversion and super hyper magnetic induction coil that will allow it to do some anti-gravity procedure. And then you will look at the speaker and you have no idea what the hell he was saying. But then that's not what you're going to act. What you're going to do is you're going to go, yeah, totally. That's what you're going to do at conference, and that's what you're going to do at with your advisor, right? Because especially for Thai students over here, you don't want to lose face. You don't want people to think that you are not smart, right? You don't want people to know that you're not intelligent, right? So then that's this imposter syndrome that you don't want to lose face. You don't want to appear stupid in front of your advisor. For many reasons, right? Maybe some of you don't want to look stupid because you have a reputation to uphold, or you don't want to disappoint your advisor. A lot of reasons, right? But all of those reasons lead up to one thing, that you don't want to look stupid in front of your advisor, right? So what you do when you talk to your advisor is that it changes the dynamics from a conversation between two people, right, your advisor and you, into a one-way communication. Because the entire time your advisor says something, you just go, yes, yeah, I understand. Yeah, I will study on it. Yes, yes, right? You see how that is not effective at all as far as communication goes, right? So that's the second thing that will prevent you from talking with your advisor. I would just call this the knowledge gap or the imposter syndrome. So 1, language barrier. 2, the knowledge gap. 3, personality. Right? I'm not saying that being in academia is the hardest career, but you have to realize that almost all the lecturers at the master and PhD level of study have been through where you are, right? They have gone through the school. They have gone through like these 2 programs of like master and PhD. They have gone through their own version of hell, right? Maybe for like 7 years, 5 years, or for me, 12 years. Wait, actually, no, 7. Wait, how many years was that? Yeah, 7 years, right? 7 years of master and PhD program. Holy crap. And it was hard, right? It was hard, but they finished it, right? And it takes a lot. I mean, I would not talk badly about anyone who got a PhD, of course not, because we all know that getting a PhD anywhere on any subjects is difficult, right? It takes a lot of self-discipline. It takes a lot of gut. It takes a lot of grit and grind to finish a graduate degree, right? Master or PhD, right? So you have to realize that personality-wise, people who are lecturer at the graduate level of studies are self-selected, right? They are hardworking people. They are hardworking and determined people who like what they're doing. And when you get hardworking people, when you get hardworking, determined people who like what they are doing, and then you show up to a conversation with that person and you don't look prepared, you're going to get shooed on, right? Because what I bet you that all of your advisors compare you to them when they were younger, right? If you are their students, they would be like, oh, by the time I was second year in my PhD program, I could have done this. By the time I passed my qualifying exam, I had already understood this topic, right? I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that's the nature of human, right? The nature of human is to compare people to yourself, right? And again, you're talking about hardworking, determined group of people who like this subject enough to come and teach it, right? So obviously they're gonna compare you to where they were when they were your age, right? I'm not saying they are always better than you. I'm saying that they're just gonna do that comparison, right? And one thing that's gonna happen very quickly is that if they don't feel like you are measuring up to where they were when they were your age, immediately the urge or the motivation to hold a long conversation with you drops significantly. I'm not saying that's a good thing, right? That's like a really bad thing, but that's human bias. That's human nature, right? And I'm not saying that, when they compare themselves to you, they were actually better when they were your age. What I'm saying is they actually don't remember how they were like when they were younger. Right? This is called the curse of knowledge. You can go and look this up. The curse of knowledge. So all advisors fall into this trap of the curse of knowledge. Right? The curse of knowledge is this. Once you have learned something, you stop appreciating how hard it is to relearn that thing from zero. Right? Most of you probably know how to ride a bicycle, right? But if I ask you, hey, describe to me how hard it was for you to learn how to ride a bicycle, you probably will say, it was hard, but I don't remember exactly how long it took me. Right? I just know that I can ride a bicycle now. I just know that I can drive a car now, right? If you have to think back on the first time that you try to ride a motorcycle, a bicycle, or drive a car, you know that it was really hard, right? But then you kind of forgot. Yeah, you kind of you don't remember how hard it was when you were learning it, right? So when an advisor comparing a student to their own experience in the past, their self-worth as an advisor is always inflated, right? Because of this curse of knowledge. They thought everything was easier than how they remembered it, right? So immediately this gap, this distance between their ego and where you are, build up this shield that prevent effective communication between you and your advisor, right? So that's number 3. And then number 4, and this I see very often, is the responsiveness of the way that you communicate with your advisor, right? So let's go back to the difference between high school and undergrad. When you were in high school, right? So again, you don't have much responsibility. You just kind of go to classes, do your homework, and then you're done, right? And then you get to undergrad, you still are doing the same thing. You go to classes, you do your homework, done. Yeah, you just kind of live off on your own. But then you still have a set of classes that you have to go. You go to the classes, you sit down, and then the lecturer tells you, hey, this is the topics that you need to know. And this is when tests going to happen. This is what you have to do to pass the class. And that's all you have to do for undergrad. And then you graduate from undergrad. And then all of a sudden you get thrown into graduate level. And then the first day in your graduate school, your advisor would probably walk up to you and be like, hey, you're going to study the how to measure guest satisfaction in a hotel, right? How to measure guest satisfaction in a hotel. Here's a paper for you to read. Go figure that shit out. And then you go, well, shit, I have never done this before. So all of a sudden, you went from having all the materials given to you by the lecturer, having all the assignments assigned to you by the lecturers, tell you when it should be done, grade you on how it should be done, tell you whether it's right or wrong, and everything, right? You went from that in undergrad to graduate level, in which you were giving a task, as in study how to measure hotel guest satisfaction. You were given a task without clear question. Like, you don't even know where you should start. You don't have clear question. You don't have clear method of study, right? There's no textbook for you to follow. There's no lecture for you to follow. You don't have friends to ask for because you're the only one doing that topic in that department. You don't have clear deadline, right? Usually the advisor would just go, hey, here, go study this paper. We'll talk again next week. Now you don't have clear deadline either. And then lastly, you are on your own, right? You went from having everything in a scheduled framework that is determined for you, right? Go to class at 9, class ends at 10, homework due next week. You went from that to shit. I don't know what the question is. I don't know what I should do exactly. I don't know where to study. I don't know what questions I should be answering. And worst of all, there is no pressure to do it. That nobody is going to yell at you for not waking up and work on your thesis. Nobody is going to yell at you for not doing shit at all, right? The advisor could be giving you that paper this week and say, hey, I will see you next week and we can talk about the paper. And then nobody is there for another 7 days. So literally, you can just do nothing for 7 days and then show up the next week to the meeting with your advisor. And your advisor can't do shit about it. Like, what is your advisor gonna do? Like, yell at you for the past 7 days that you didn't work? Well, yeah, he or she could, but he or she wasn't there to pressure you the entire week for you to work on it, right? Unlike in undergrad, when you know what to do and when is it due, right? So that's like a huge thing that is shifted between your undergrad level of study and the master and PhD. So again, these 4 things prevent you from talking to your advisor effectively. So 1, language barrier, right? 2, knowledge gap, because you don't think you're smart enough to be talking to your advisor. 3, the personality of your advisor, right? And then 4, your own responsibility, right? And obviously I put number 4 at the last item because it's the most important thing for effective communication with your advisor. Okay. All right. So let's address each of them in turn. Right. So number 1, language barrier. So language barrier, again, if your advisor is the kind of person that use the language that you're comfortable with all the time, so let's say he or she speak to you in Thai all the time, well, good for you, but you won't be improved, right? Because you know at the end of the study, you will have to write that paper in English, right? So then the first type of advisor who use Thai with you all the time or Chinese with you all the time, your native tongue, that's fine. That's your problem. It's your problem to improve English. But most of you probably will struggle more with the advisor who just kind of throw English at you all the time, right? And my recommendation for you for communicating with this kind of advisor is, well, tough shit out. Getting shit done. What the fuck do you expect? So again, if you have listened to part 1 of this program, you know I struggled hard with my English when I got to the US, right? My English didn't get, like, it wasn't, I wouldn't consider it good up until like the 6th or 7th year of me being in the US. As far as using it academically go, right? I could like order food and stuff like within the first few months and weeks, but like to get it up to the level that I can express my complex thoughts academically, that took like 6 and 7 years, right? So the language barrier that stops you from speaking to your advisor is nothing, right? Because you have to recognize this. Your advisor's first language is probably not English either, right? If you listen to this series, you are probably not in the US, you're probably not in the EU, but if you are, hi. So most likely you are not in the US or the EU, right? So most likely your advisor's first language is not English either. So my point is this: your advisor has been through where you are, right? They know how you feel, and yet they use English anyway because, you know why? Because they are hardworking and determined people. They remember how hard it was for them to learn English. And the only way for them to teach you is to give you the same sort of experience that they got when they went through the program. But then they were trying to learn the language. Right. So I would say, as far as language barrier go, do not be embarrassed that your level of English is not good enough. Just embrace it. All right. Just don't chicken out. Just be brave. What else is there to lose? Right. Just if your advisors talk to you in English, well, shit, talk to them in English. It's their job to deal with your broken ass English, and not your job to well, it is your job to get your English skills better, but it is their job to understand what you're trying to communicate. And I will tell you this: I have not met a single person, I have not met a single advisor who doesn't appreciate students who try. Right? It is the students who are typically get embarrassed or get shy for not speaking for speaking English. Usually what I find is that students who start off trying to do it in English, and then they get embarrassed about their English level, and then they say, hey, can I do that? Can I do the presentation in Thai? Or can I ask the question in Thai? Well, bullshit. If you want to learn, the only way to learn is to use it all the time, right? And we talked about this in GSD part 1. So as far as language barrier goes, let me tell you this. The language barrier is not with the advisor. It is always the students who have problem with not being brave enough to use English. Your advisor would spend all day talking to you in English and trying to get you to understand, right? If you don't have that kind of advisor, then wait until the end of this episode when it talks about what to do when you have shit advisor, because I got one and I have an experience to share. All right. But just wait until the end of the episode. All right. So language barrier is nothing. It's on you, the students. The advisor should be nice enough and supportive enough for them to help you out with your English. Knowledge gap, right? You don't want to lose faith. You don't want to look stupid in front of your advisor. I understand. And I have been in your shoes. I have been in the situation in which every single fucking person in the lab seemed to understand what the advisor was talking about, except me. Right? Everyone else understood or seemed to understand what the advisor was talking about, except me. Right? And that's a really, really hard situation for you to be in, because you don't want to look stupid, man. You don't want to be like, I have no idea what you just said. You don't. It takes a lot of courage to do that, and it takes a lot of courage to do that all the time, right? And you're probably gonna expect me to say, well, talk shit out and just ask it. No, I actually don't. So I realize there are many solutions to this problem, but I will just tell you what works for me. Okay. So there's a right balance for everyone between not asking anything at all, right? Imposter syndrome, knowledge gap, right? You have this end who will just pretend that they understand everything, right? And this is not good, because this is not communication, right? Like I said, if you pretend that you know everything, even though you don't, then you get a one-way communication. You want a conversation. You don't want broadcast from your advisor, right? On the other end of the spectrum, right, this person doesn't ask at all and just pretend that they know. On the other end of the spectrum, you don't want to ask everything. You don't want to be like, hey, I heard that you talked about this and I don't understand point A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. Can you explain to me? Right? Because that will take your advisor 10 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. And we all don't have time for that, right? So that's definitely the right balance between not asking shit and asking all the shit all the time, right? And the right balance for everyone is different, right? Maybe you leaning toward asking a lot of questions, but not all of them, or leaning toward asking fewer questions but don't be at the extreme. Right? Point number one: do not be at the extreme. Do not just pretend that you know everything, and do not know everything, because either end is annoying as hell. Okay. Uh, so the question then becomes, how do you find the right balance between these two ends, right? So what did work for me and turned out that improved the communication between me and my advisor tremendously is this: every time your advisor discusses something that you don't understand, write it down. Right? I will go step by step, very slowly. This is what worked for me. Might work for you, might not work for you. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, well, shit, go find your own method. Right? Every time your advisor says something you don't understand, write it down. Every single little things. Write it down and go study it later. Right? Write it down and go study it later. That's how I started. Right? If your advisor is starting talking about like the Black-Scholes equation and the basis difference between the spot and the futures market, and you have no idea what the fuck he's talking about, write it down. Especially if you're new to the lab, right? Just write it down, and if they ask you if you understand or not, be honest. Just be like, I don't quite understand it, but I will go study on it, and I will come back and ask you questions. That's what I did, right? And eventually you turn from, yeah, I actually don't understand it, but I will take time on my own to study it, to, yeah, I don't understand it, but here's what I understand right now. How does that fit in with what I have already understood, right? So again, level one is you just write everything down. That's probably your like first 2 months in your lab. It's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? And you just write everything down. If anyone asks you, just be honest, right? I don't understand, but I will read it up. Level two would be, hey, I still don't understand what you are saying, but here's what I understand and relate it to what you are saying. Can you please put it in a new framework, in this framework that I'm familiar with, to help me understand? Right? And hopefully toward the end of your study, you probably can graduate to level 3, which is like, yeah, I understand partially what you just said. Can you explain these little questions that I have in addition to what you just said? Right. So you see how you progress from not understanding many things, but being about it, to actually contributing to the study or the goal of your research group. Right. So that's what worked for me. Right. And that will address the knowledge gap, because you're not starting from, I don't understand, but I will just pretend to understand. Right. You're not just doing the yeah, oh yeah, I read that, yes, yes, because that's just bullshit. You do not understand. Just write shit down, study it later. Okay. And then you go from that to, hey, I still don't understand what you said, but here's a related item. Can you explain that to me in this framework that I'm familiar with? And then the last stage is for you to contribute back to this discussion with your advisor. Right? So that's the knowledge gap part. Right? That worked for me really well, and it improved both my study, my relationship with my advisor tremendously. And I would highly recommend you do it that way, because, I mean, your advisor would not admit to this, but trust me, if you ask too many questions, all advisors get annoyed. I don't give a crap how nice your advisors are, but if you ask too many questions, every single advisor will get annoyed at some point, right? So my point of writing it down and studying on your own is this: you want to get on the good side of your advisor, right? And you want to pick and choose what you can ask your advisor, right? Only ask your advisor the important stuff, the things that you don't think you can find out on your own, right? That's the role of your advisor. The role of your advisor to support you, is to guide you, is to inspire you, right? So don't ask them something stupid like, oh, what's the definition of an average number? And then your advisor would be like, can you Google that up? And I guarantee you, if your advisor has to answer questions that he think you can Google it up, many times he or she will get annoyed, right? So pick and choose your battle, write it down, go Google shit up. If you don't understand it, still come back. But do not just simply ask the question when you know you can Google it up later, right? So something that you can Google it up, like definition, you can Google it up. Basic information, you can Google it up. Like for example, if you hear, the p-value of this research, the p-value of this now hypothesis testing is about 0.03, and therefore is statistically significant. You have no idea. Let's assume you have no idea what I just said, right? But you heard the p-value of this noun thesis, noun hypothesis testing is something, and is statistically significant, right? That's 3 terms that you should write down. And those are 3 terms that I'm probably sure that you think you could Google it up, right? So those kind of things, unless it's absolutely crucial for that conversation, don't ask. Go Google it up, right? And this will tie into number 4 as well. Like we will come back to this point when we talk about the responsibility of communicating with your advisor. All right. Number 3 for difficulty in communication is, again, the personality of your advisor. Right? So again, this is the curse of knowledge. Your advisors think that they were better than you when they were your age, right? So this one is hard to overcome because it's a natural human nature to do that. But the one thing that you can solve this problem entirely is that do not give your advisor the possibility of comparing knowledge, because I guarantee you will almost always lose unless you are like absolutely star fucking student. Right? If you give your advisor an opportunity to compare knowledge at all, especially if you have an advisor that is like competitive like me, it will be a competition, right? So change that. Change the framework. Change the framework of communication to collaborative, right? And the only way to do that, and here's the crucial point when you want to communicate or negotiate with your advisor, the way to change from competition of knowledge, that is, you just talk to your advisor. You're just like, oh, blah, blah, blah. This is what I understand. What do you think? This is what you think. This is what I think, right? That's a competition. That's a debate most of the time, right? The way to change from competitive framework to collaborative framework is for you, the student, to create something, right? Here's the key. If you want better relationship and communication with your advisor, never show up to any meeting empty-handed. So let me repeat that again. Never show up to any meeting with your advisors or mentors empty-handed. Right? Never show up and say, hey, I have read that paper that you told me to read. That will not work, because as soon as you say that, this is what's going to happen. Your advisor is going to say, well, what did you learn from that paper? And then you will say, oh, I learned that, fish A is bigger than fish B. And then your advisor will be like, well, how do they know that? And then you'll be like, oh, they use this statistical method. And then your advisor will be, what statistical method did they use? Why don't they use the other one, which is better? You see how that's a competition, right? Change the framework, right? Do not allow competitive environment. Create something, right? So let's change the scenario. Let's say your advisor gave you the same goddamn fish paper, and then you have to meet with your advisor in a week, right? Never show up empty-handed, okay? Write something down, right? You have read the paper, write it down. Write down your own summary of the paper, right? Write down your own analysis of the paper. write down your strength and weaknesses of that paper, right? And then when the meeting comes between you and your advisor, show that to your advisor. This is what I did to most of my meeting, right? Most of the by the end of my graduate studies, I always show up with a new plot, a new graph, new PowerPoint, right? For example, I'd be like, hey, I don't actually understand the concept of spin flip. So here's like a short discussion presentation PowerPoint that I made just to make sure I understand what's going on. Right? And then I presented the work, right? And you see how that changed from, hey, this is what I understand. What do you think, advisor? To here's my understanding of spin flip. Can you help me fix this presentation so that it is more correct, right? So you change from debating about what a spin flip is to let's work on this PowerPoint together. Let's work on this plot together. Let's work on this methodology together, right? Never show up to a meeting with your advisor empty-handed, right? And that ties into the last barrier of communication between you and your advisor, which is your responsibility, right? The advisor has their own responsibilities as well, right? We will talk about that in a little bit. But as far as your responsibility goes, here's what I'm going to say, right? Earlier in the series or in the episode, we talked about the vast difference between the undergrad level and the graduate level, right? That is your responsibility, right? You have like a lot more responsibility when it comes to graduate level studies. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Regardless of how caring your advisor is about you as a person and as a student, do not expect your advisor to know every single details about your study, right? Your advisor will not know, in all likelihood, how many courses you have to take. Your advisor will not know what are required courses, what are elective courses. Your advisor will not know how much tuition you're paying. Your advisor will not know when is the deadline to submit paperwork. Your advisor will not know the procedure to organize a thesis community defense. If they know, good for them, but do not expect them to know, right? Because the responsibility to get from being accepted into a graduate school and graduate from that school is solely on you. Let me say that again. Responsibility for graduation is on you. Do not expect your advisor to help you to graduate. That's not the point of being an advisor, right? I don't care what you have heard in the past. The point of being an advisor is not to help you to graduate, right? That is your own responsibility, right? So never show up to an advisor meeting and go, oh, I expect you to have signed some kind of paper by last week. Never do that, right? So with that being said, right, your failure in planning is not your advisor's emergency, right? Your advisor is not available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So be mindful, be courteous, be mindful of your advisor's time, right? Do not rush anything, right? So the one thing that get your advisor angry the most, and this happened to my advisor as well because I was a shit student, is that I assumed that as a part of being an advisor is to help student to graduate, right? Again, that is not true. Your advisor has one role and one role only, right? And that is to support and inspire you on your way to graduation, right? And not make sure your paperwork is done, not making sure you have everything done by the deadline, right? Advisors are there to support and inspire you, to graduate, right? Many advisors also do more than that. I totally realize. Like many advisors will also like support you personally, financially, blah blah blah. But then again, that falls under the big umbrella of being supportive and inspiring to you, graduate students, so that you can graduate with a high quality education and go and be a productive citizen of the world. Right? So every time you show up to a meeting with your advisor or communicating with your advisor, keep this in mind, right? Advisors are not here to tolerate your irresponsibility or deal with your emergency. We're just here to support and inspire you. Some advisors will probably do that. We will like tolerate your emergency, help you out in every which way. But I can guarantee you that they probably would rather be doing something more inspiring than helping you sorting out through your paperwork, right? And if there's one thing that I did really well when I was a graduate student that I could say is this, right? I dealt with all the paperwork myself. The only thing that my advisor ever had to do as far as paperwork go is to sign his name on pieces of paper as I described to him what he's about to sign. Right? So keep that in mind that like be responsible with the communication from your end, right? The advisor also has their ends of the bargain of being advisor that they have to do, like be polite, be sympathetic of the student, blah blah blah. But we are not talking to advisors over here, right? We're talking to you, the graduate students. So again, the 4 things that I have found that prevent people from talking to their advisor effectively is the language barrier, right? Which is nothing at all. Like I said, it's usually in your head, right? The problem is with the students more than with the advisors. Number 2 is the knowledge gap that you have found. So again, I gave you a simple method of write it down, study later, and gradually increase your contribution to the research, right? And then 3, the personality of your advisor. To get over the personality of being competitive of your advisor, especially if you get me as your advisor, is to change from competitive environment to collaborative environment, right? Create things that you and your advisor can work on it together, right? So then you change from competition to collaboration, right? And then lastly, make sure you're responsible for your own shit, right? This ain't no undergrad no more, right? So hopefully by the time you graduate from your program, you will be ready for the workforce, right? And once you go to work for someone as an employee, or even worse, if you start your own business, man, the responsibility level will go through the roof. Right? So you have to be better. You have to be on top of everything because it is on you, right? It is on you to make sure everything is done correctly. All right. So that's the normal course of communications with your advisor. But sometimes you get shit advisor, and I got one. Not like the advisor that I finally ended up with. Cass, if you listen to this, you were wonderful. But I got one advisor that was kind of toxic, I guess. So I wouldn't go into the details why it was a bad experience for me, but let's just say he was not communicative. Like he did not talk much. He didn't show up much to the lab. Lab meeting was always off topic. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I didn't receive the guidance that was necessary, that I thought was necessary for me to thrive in that graduate level of study. But now that I'm reflecting back on it, it was probably partially my fault as well, because I fail trap into like the 4 communication barriers that I just talked about. But let's just say you are super unlucky, right? You are super unlucky, and you don't want to. You got like really bad advisor, right? Me, for example. You got a really bad advisor. What can you do, right? Remember this: when you sign up for a graduate program, you're not signing up to be married to the advisor, right? You're not married to the advisor. You can change your advisor, which is the last thing that you could do, right? But before then, there are so many more steps. If you don't think you have a positive experience communicating with your advisor, well, go talk to someone in the department. Right? Go talk to the vice deans of student affairs. Go talk to the staff in the office. Go talk to the dean of your department. Right? Elevate the issue to other people. Right? But again, you should do this after you have tried to talk to your advisor honestly, right? That's the key thing, man. Be direct about what you want. Be direct about how you feel, right? Talk to your advisor first. And if you can't resolve the issues, then you can elevate the problems to other people in the department. And if your advisor is really shit, you're probably not the first one to have that problem with your advisor, right? So your dean probably knows what to do, right? So keep that in mind, that you never ever alone in your graduate program, right? You have a support system of the department beyond your advisor that is there to help you. Okay, so never feel alone is what I'm trying to say, right? So so that's for disputing with bad advisor, I guess. But if there's one thing that I want to leave you with, since we're running out of time here, if there's one thing that I want to leave you with as far as communicating with your advisor go, it's this: create things, right? Never show up empty-handed to any event, right? Because again, you are here trying to learn something, right? And in order to learn something, in order to prove that you have learned something, you have to create things. You can't just talk about it. Unless you are a really good talker, right? But most of the time, you will want to create something to show that you have worked, whether that's like a short presentation, not even a presentation. Like if you can just walk up to a whiteboard and be like, hey, advisor, I just learned about this and I think it's fascinating. Can you listen to me for about 5 minutes? That's fantastic. You have created something, right? You have created something, and creating something is wonderful, right? Never show up to any communication event empty-handed, and that will earn you the respect from your advisor. It will help you motivate your advisor because he or she now knows that you are committed to this study program and the topic that you are doing. And that will eventually, in the long run, if you keep creating new knowledge all the time, right, that will address the knowledge gap that you have. And the best of all, every time you create something, create it in English. Never write it down in Thai. And that will also help you improve your English skills as well. And that's absolutely what I did as a PhD student, right? When I was working in a physics lab, and sometimes I ran into a problem that I couldn't figure out, right? I did not understand the physics. So what did I do? Instead of keep doing physics, I just went into like automating the apparatus in the lab. Write out documentation on processes in the lab that is important, right? Make new things, clean the lab, do something, right? Make maintenance table for your lab equipment, right? Anything, create something. Because sometimes you get into this rut of like, you don't know where to go next. And then when you go talk to your advisor, if you go talk to your advisor 3 weeks in a row, and every time you go, yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's going on. For 3 weeks in a row, I can guarantee you that your advisor will be demotivated in teaching you, right? But if every week you go in and you be like, yeah, I still don't understand that point, but I clean the lab. That's week 1. Week 2, you go, hey, I still don't understand that point fully, but why don't you listen to my presentation about which part I don't understand, right? That shows that you have done some work on it. And then maybe third week, you go, hey, I understand about 80-90% of it. I also made this documentation in the lab and I got bored. Can you fill out the rest of the 10%, right? And that little progression from week to week, because you have created something, that is what going to motivate your advisor the most, right? So never show up empty-handed. All right. So with that being said, that is it on this topic of negotiating with your advisor or communicating with your advisor, right? So again, don't show up empty-handed. God damn it, I hate that. And be honest about how you feel, right? Be honest about what you understand and don't understand. Don't let language stand between you and your advisor, because that's just bullshit, right? You can always improve your English. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. Next week, we're going to talk about how do you stay motivated in your graduate program, because I can tell you, everyone who has done any kind of master or PhD program at all want to quit at some point. Right. So I'm going to tell you about how to stay motivated in your program. What do you do when you get demotivated, when you just feel like, shit, what the hell I'm doing here? We're going to talk about it next week. All right. So this is GSD part 2. Again, we have this program. Oh, not that one. We have this program every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Right. If you would like to get in touch with us, or me in particular, there is a link to our Facebook and Line group in the video description. You could also just scan this QR with your Line application to get in touch with me. All right. So again, this is Getting Shit Done with Tanwa part 2, trying to get you to graduate on time and be a better graduate student. As for today, peace out. I'll see you again next Friday at 1:30.